Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on the Steppes of Prague, playing as the forces of the Vampire Counts against the forces of Brettonia. And for this matchup, one of the things I really wanted to do was, well, match Brettonia lance for lance and bring a more Blood Knight themed build. And this is already something I kind of do, kind of my standard build for Brettonia. It does involve quite a bit of Blood Knights because I don't like trying to fight Brettonia in the air. I think I've seen a lot of Vampire Count players who like to bring a lot of Terror guys. They try to match Brettonia in the air. The fact of the matter is, if Brettonia commits to the air fight, they will win, unless the Brettonian player is really bad. Unless they really screw up, if Brettonia commits to the air fight, they will beat you. And because of that, I don't like going air heavy with Vampire Counts. And so for my lord here, I'm going to be running a Blood Dragon on a horse. Nothing too fancy. He does get a bonus for his infantry, which isn't huge in cav fights, obviously. It doesn't really help you, but it can help him cleave through cheap trash, can help him snipe out smaller foot characters if your opponent happens to bring those. Sometimes you'll see Gotrek or Felix or Faye perhaps on foot, and he can help deal with that a little better. More importantly, of course, he does bring the Helm of Discord, allowing you to nuke enemy stats in a significant blob battle, as well as Heart Piercer, which synergizes incredibly well with his Blood Knights over here. And since most of my anti-large force is non-AP, well, that Heart Piercer will really come into play. You also do, of course, have Raised Dead, Invocation of Attack, as well as Van Hell's Dance Macabre. And this is actually our only caster on the field right now. Should also note that we do have Honor or Death, a leadership buff, and damage resistance, a ward save that you get when you're in melee. So all in all, this guy's definitely a beefcake. He can stay in the fight, slug it out, and provide perfect support for these Blood Knights. Obviously, we are going to be low on Winds of Magic in this battle because all we got is a Blood Dragon. He's not a great caster, but I figured that's a worthy sacrifice to get more damage. Alongside him, two White Kings, and these guys are on foot, and they are completely stripped down to nothing. That drops them to 500 gold. Their stats, though, very solid for cleaving through infantry. They get a bonus versus infantry of, I believe it is 14, and that makes them very good at chewing through units like the Battle Pilgrims or Holy Wardens in this case, through units such as Foot Squires, and of course, dealing with units like Gotrek and Felix, who can be an absolute pain in the rear for Vampire Counts. Besides that, front line is a mix of spears, as well as a single unit of Graveguard on one end and the Sternsmen on the other. Of course, very good anti-infantry units. They will beat down essentially everything Brettonia can put on the field as far as infantry is concerned, so definitely looking to get some value there. Though there will be a bit of an interesting matchup here, as the Holy Wardens do cause fire damage, which is going to do well, I believe, against the Sternsmen. Now, besides that, we do have two pockets of cav. One includes Direwolves and Blood Knights, the cheaper flank there, and then the other here, Blood Knights, a Dire Pack, as well as a Vargulf. And the Vargulf is great for single target AP, for helping chew down enemy cav, but also to provide you with some fear, terror, and disruption. So just a very good presence. Now for my opponent here, he did decide to go with a bit of a mixed build. It's got a little bit of everything. For his lord, he is rolling with Lewin. Lewin's never a bad choice. Personally, I prefer Faye in this matchup, but Lewin, you can't go wrong with Louis. He's got all of his kit here, I believe, including the Sword of Corone, so definitely ready to debuff my troops, make his troops fight a bit better in that sort of mosh pit duel. He also does that stand your ground, buffs his own troops' defensive stats, line, shield, potentially if I brought Spear Leech or something like that, makes him very beefy. And of course, the Ladies Champion for the Heels, Beloved Son, granting map-wide second frenzy, essentially, if he drops below 50% HP. So no sniping Lewin. Besides that, his caster is a Damsel of Life on foot with Regrowth, Earthblood, and the Shield of Thorns. Not a bad kit. I do think it's better to bring it on a horse. Or of the Lady, kind of a useless ability here. I definitely wouldn't bring that. But Life Bloom, you could probably bring a Power Stone for the cost of that. That would be much better. But besides that, very strong support caster. Can really help these Grail Knights, Royal Pegasus Knights, as well as Companions of Canel that my opponent's brought to the field. So it's some very monstrous cav here. Probably, if we just look at this cav contingent, my opponent has the advantage. Between Lewin, 3 very elite anti-large cavs, gets essentially the Vargulf and 2 Blood Knights. It's going to be a tough fight. In the meantime, front line is a mix of Men-at-Arms, Foot Squires, Men-at-Arms with Spears, or Spear Men-at-Arms, Holy Wardens and Lamais and Tal, a second line of more Men-at-Arms and more Spear Men-at-Arms, and 2 Peasant Bows with fire arrows. So a bit of a mixed bag of infantry. They're definitely looking to stall me out. And I see my opponent's flexing his cav over here, so I decide to shift my Blood Knights over to this flank. Now, one of the important things to keep in mind as you're playing with your cav, if you're playing against a very mobile force such as this, you do not want to get your cav isolated. Now, I didn't see my opponent's Companions of Canel hidden in the forest. I did a quick head count of my opponent's troops. Something that's always good if you're not under supreme pressure to attack. Take your time a little bit, count your opponent's troops. Right now, I did a head count on my opponent, and I knew that I could see most of his troops. But I figured I don't want to just push in towards this woods. Potentially, my opponent could pivot, or he had a hidden unit there, and he could get the jump on me and annihilate, say, these Blood Knights and these Direwolves if I tried to flank separate from this blob here. So I decided to collect all of my cavalry on this flank. Obviously, I don't have to worry about my troops routing. One of the nice benefits of Vampire Counts is that I don't have to worry about the spears routing. My opponent suddenly sallies out and decides to surround me here. So we're just going to push straight on forward. Here you can see I'm kind of posturing. I wasn't sure. Didn't want to sort of blob everything up, but I wanted to consolidate my cav a little bit. So if my opponent made a push to engage one of my pockets, the other could support them quickly. And what I see a lot of cav players do is, or a lot of players do, is that they will just commit to a flank and they're like, I put these guys out here, they're going to stay here. But you don't want to do that, in my opinion. Now, as the engagements go, I'm going to try to get good engagements here. Bit of a low IQ play on my part, though, is going to be committing the Sternsmen against the Wardens of Lama Santal. I didn't even think about the fact they do fire damage. Really, I should have probably swapped them with the Graveguard, because I did have time to set up my charges and engagements, and these guys would have probably mulched through the foot squares much more effectively. But they do have a Viking supporting them, so they should do well there. Meantime, my cav here is consolidating, ready and looking for an opening somewhere. My opponent does take his Companions of Canal, puts them in lance formation, which I think is a mistake. Usually keep your cav in a wide open formation, better engagements that way. But he plows straight into the Sternsmen and is going to do insane damage on the charge there. But here I am. I see the opening. I'm going to be looking to engage my opponent over here. Blood Knights are actually going to get a beefy charge into the Men-at-Arms here, doing a little bit of damage to them and disrupting them. Now my opponent countercharges with the Grail Knights, so we are in turn going to get our own charge in. Dire Pack and the Vargulf plowing in, as is the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord. And already a mosh pit is forming down here in the pits as the Knights of Bloodkeep surge forward. The second pocket of cavalry essentially moving in to reinforce. These Blood Knights here actually didn't get engaged very well because my opponent's Grail Knights kind of got snagged up on his own Men-at-Arms and then shifted targeting to the Vargulf and the Blood Dragon. So we are going to see a bit of a charge here. And the Blood Knights just surging in, slamming into the backs of those Grail Knights, and immediately putting a few of them in the ground. So that's definitely a bit of a win. Unfortunately, the Dire Pack is not going to last long in this world, but you can see that a whole bunch of buffs and debuffs are already going off. My opponent popping Shield of Thorns, Stand Your Ground, Foe Seeker, all of that, debuffing me with the, I believe he was debuffing me with the Sword of Corone there. You can see Heart Piercer is going off, debuffing my opponent's armor on some of his troops. These are all Pegasus Knights now down to 50 armor. Of course, Helm of Discord going down. So this is just a blob battle of all blob battles, and everything is going down here. Unfortunately, these Questing Knights here actually kind of getting blocked out by the Spearmen. Skeleton Spears here blocking them. Van Hell's Dance Macabre goes down, buffing this pocket of cav. And my opponent is getting overwhelmed. He cannot hold this. Men-at-Arms actually rout, which is in turn going to free up my cav to surround his cav more efficiently. Royal Pegasus Knights here getting whomped on by the Vargulf and the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord. And I decided really to focus out one cav unit at a time. So these Royal Pegasus Knights are on the chopping block. Them and the Grails are not going to last long. And the Companions. Companions are an excellent anti-large unit. They are the best one-on-one anti-large cav in the game. They actually dumpster Blood Knights. They're probably grossly underpriced in my opinion. But they'll beat even the Royal Dorgrifites and, of course, the Fireborn. But zoned out like this, they can't contribute, and so we are getting this ideal situation here. The Vampires are crushing the Grails as well as the Royal Pegasus Knights. A few of them take to the air, but not enough of them are able to extricate themselves. The Direwolves, in the meantime, pulling out, as is the Vargulf, looking for a new opening. What I should have been doing here is cycle charging a little more. I summoned some zombies on my opponent's backline, and I'm just keeping him sort of suppressed, keeping him bogged down. We can't see more Men-at-Arms fleeing, terror kicking in, definitely a bit of a disaster there. And in the meantime, this infantry line is buckling. These Sternsmen do break through despite taking significant casualties. Mostly the Companions of Canal, they do break through. They're going to go for the archers now. Over here, the Graveguard as well as the Viking diving into the Men-at-Arms, just plowing through. They've plowed through the Foot Squires and are just doing an insanely good job here. Look at these guys, 87 kills, doing great work. Graveguard were buffed, or I should say rebalanced recently, so they do more damage, but they are a bit more expensive, but still a very, very powerful unit. Over here, Lewin is, he's doing great. Like, Lewin for himself is doing a good job. He's causing quite a bit of damage, up to 40 kills, but he's not able to help these Companions and do their job. So now they're getting surrounded. At this point, the Grails are basically gone. So they have immunity psychology, so yeah, they'll fight to the last, but at this point, there's 9 models there, so I don't give a crap. The Companions of Canals here getting dragged into the muck. My opponent not casting magic. I'm not sure if the damsel was too far or if... oh, there we go. We see some spells going down. I'm not sure if that's on my end or on my opponent's end. It is the Helm of Discord going down, so debuffing this pocket further and dragging the poor Companions of Canal into the gutter. At this point, they're screwed. Losing model after model, and they won't be able to hold up. The Royal Pegasus Knights do recover, but keep in mind they lose their physical resist when they rout, so that is a big downside. Even if they do rally, these troops will not come back in good shape. Another Shield of Thorns going down, of course the heal going down as well from the passive, but at this stage it is the battle is essentially won. We have a single unit of Blood Knights here who's gained a Chevron and is doing insanely well for themselves. Over here, the Blood Dragon has fought his way clear. Now we're going to be able to sort of crush these peripheral troops, then push into my opponent's back pockets. Now he did win some fights. These men-at-arms did beat the Skeleton Spears. The Holy Wardens are rallying here in the background. But there just isn't much left. The Grail Knights screwed. Royal Pegasus Knights down to 2 models. The Companions of Canal, which I believe got eradicated by the Hounds, the Doggos, the Direwolves, did a great job there. Blood Knights are exhausted or drained, so now they are not getting those meaty charges they once had, but it doesn't really matter at this stage. Sternsmen here still fighting tooth and nail in the pits. Sword of Corone goes down, trying to buff this pocket. Damsel of Life, they're getting clobbered by the Blood Dragon. This is really where he shines against single entity characters like this, foot characters. He can really just dumpster them. And despite Lewin's best efforts, he's not going to be able to sustain this. The Graveguard here being hit by an Invocation of the Heck. Unfortunately, Sternsmen are not, so they're dying, but oh well, they've done their duty at this point. More Blood Knight charges coming in, just pouring in from all sides. The White King coming in. Lewin is at this point really the last man standing, getting torn to shreds, and my opponent's army is going to rout and break and yeah, shatter. So army loss kicks in. A Pyrrhic victory for the Vampire Counts. Now, in that game, I do think my opponent's build was not terrible. I thought both builds were relatively decent. I thought there were definitely things that both myself and my opponent could have done better with build-wise. I think for myself, it could have been better to bring a secondary caster in there, or just a Necromancer for the Forbidden Rod, just to get more Winds of Magic on the field. I think that would not necessarily have been a bad choice, but otherwise I'm pretty satisfied with this composition. I do think the Vikings are a nice choice, just in case your opponent brings Felix and Gotrek, because those two are such a pain in the rear to deal with. They are super frustrating to deal with, and in my opinion they're kind of broken, though less so for Brettonia than others. But really, I think the Vikings would have been much more useful if that had happened, but as it was, keep in mind, these guys only cost 500 gold. So they were doing a lot of work against those men-at-arms. They were helping sort of beef up this Graveguard line. If my opponent had gotten more heavy on infantry, and really just putting the work in, the Graveguard, of course, excellent job. Gaining a Chevron. Look at these Chevrons gain. Chevron gain on the Graveguard, Chevron gain on Blood Knights, 2 Chevrons on these Blood Knights. Just really, really putting in the mileage and crushing the enemy cav. For my opponent, I think the biggest downside to this build is, I'd say, is the Damsel of Life being on foot. I'd keep her on a horse. Second of all, secondary critique really is the health committing to air. I think in this matchup you either want to commit to air or you don't want to go air at all, because there's a good chance. Now personally, I am not fond of bringing Vampire Count air in this matchup, but I know a lot of Vampire Count players are fond of that, and because of that I wouldn't want to bring Royal Pegasus Knights and Lewin alone, because chances are if your opponent really commits to that air game, they can outmatch these 2 units. Yeah, you have peasant bows, but they can drop zombies on them. They can compromise that, and you lose that air fight, and now you're down a bunch. So my recommendation, personally, would be, hell, they just rout Lewin off with like bats, and they can chase him with bats off the field, and then at that point you're down a leader, and there's like 90% of this army routes. So that's one thing I would mention. I'm not a fan of this half-baked approach. I think you should either commit to the air or don't bother at all. I'd rather take an extra unit of Grail Knights, put this lady on a horse, keep Lewin on a Hippogriff if you want, because he can avoid engagement more effectively as a single entity, but those would just be my 2 cents there. Fire Arrow is not necessarily the worst thing ever. You can zone away enemy dogs and whatnot with your cav, and these guys can pressure Mortis engines and the like, so I don't think they're a bad choice. But really, the main critique there would be the Damsel on being on foot and the semi-commitment there. Besides that, really, I think a lot of that match boiled down to the engagements. I was really able to saturate my opponent's cav with zombies. I was able to block him off with my skeleton spears. I was able to actually consolidate all my cav in one spot. I got all the Blood Knights, the Wargulf, the Dire Pack, the Dire Wolves, and the Blood Dragon all in the same engagement at the same time. My opponent got all of his cav in that engagement, but not as completely. The companions of Canel were zoned out by the skeleton spears. In my opinion, you should have extricated them and re-engaged from a different angle. And because you did not do that, companions ended up kind of getting screwed. So something to watch out for, I think, is definitely how your engagement, what sort of engagement you're taking. And also always be wary of a grind engagement against vampire counts. It's just a tough one. But regardless, well played to the Night King here. Do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share. If you have any comments, critiques, or questions, don't hesitate to post them down below. I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.